number 64. So this is 2023, January 5th. Going to be talking today about Alzheimer's disease, a lot of the factors surrounding it as far as approvals, FDAs. And so I'm going to start talking a lot about the mainstream healthcare AI. So basically, it's the landscape is completely different. I'm going to be touching on this with Apple and NVIDIA in specific, and then I'm going to go over some of these recent breakthrough medical devices that also need neuroimaging, but on their own, it's a step in the right direction to get more tests and have them more widely available. And then some of the future directions as well. So I wanted to cover this as these are some of the areas that continue to be looked at. I've covered a lot of these, say in recent weeks. So anywhere from social well-being, bias, privacy, reliability, transparency is going to be a huge theme. Multimodal too. Human-centered approach, accountability, value alignment, and is it governable? Now, the Alzheimer's Association posted this. There's $270 billion that was accounted for in 2021 due to caregiver costs. Last year, they estimated $320 billion. 1 in 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's, and greater than 6 million Americans live with the disease. And in 2050, $1 trillion to go towards it as well. Now, a lot of these studies, this is a multimodal study, and by that I mean that you have imaging plus say blood work plus cerebral spinal fluid. But in the early fusion, which is you see prediction diagnosis, MCI is similar to AD. It's mild cognitive impairment. So you see that as the primary factor a lot of the times with research. And here's some of the organizations involved that you can get involved with in volunteering and advocacy. So the mechanism's been revised over the years. And when I talk about PET or MRI, it's either, in PET scans, you look at amyloid beta or you look at tau. So this is kind of an overview for that. Now, healthcare data itself, 30% is medical, and of that, 90% is imaging. So over 5.5 billion global imaging procedures a year. And then the compounding annual growth rate, you're looking at like 45%. It's at least 10% higher than quantum computing. So Apple, so it's worth researching a lot of these companies. Everybody just assumes people are just, wearing these features on your wrist and getting the data in your phone. And a good quote is basically they say, our vision for the future is to continue to create science-based technology that equips people with even more information and acts as an intelligent guardian. So you'll see that term intelligent guardian be applied to the watch, the Apple Watch. It's got, oxygen sensor, heart rate sensor, temperature as well. Now, they say nurses in over 90% of the U.S. Top 20 hospitals use iPhone for clinical communication. 83% of U.S. physicians are expected that patient generated data integrated with care delivery will be standard in the coming years, these next 5 to 10 years. So Apple's big goal with this is to provide easy to understand, meaningful insights so the users can be empowered. So it's interesting because Apple works very closely with users, the hospitals, and insurance. And, basically there's benefits for everybody going digital. The hospitals love it because they're getting data from their patients before the patient steps in the door, right? So if they're set up with their doctor there. And they have 4 main pillars: essential and secure place to store and view their health data. Apple Watch X, here you go. Here's this term, intelligent guardian, figured artificial intelligence for users' health, features for everyday health and fitness, and supports innovative third-party health and fitness apps with tools. Now, they say, 17 different areas, of health, 150 plus types of health data, 800 plus institutions offering health records on the phone, and then, figure tens of thousands of apps through this health kit. Now, they have a fair number of collaborators. So say, for instance, with the heart study, it was Stanford. This is also Harvard, Brigham and Women's Hospital, University of Michigan, for different aspects of health. It's every type of health disease is a little bit different. So this is the second one. So this is basically the big report. And, they say with this, a patient has the option to choose how much data they want to share. So for medical ID, it's on one side where you literally have everything available on the lock screen of your phone. And I believe they don't even have to log in. So this would be like a emergency call, those types of things. And likewise, on the other end, you have people that just submit their health data, and it's for training. So for many different cases. So the U.S., say for instance, a benefit for the patient is instead of going to the hospital, many people, I was at a tech coffee in town here, they just monitor their heart rate on their watch. So it establishes this communication with the hospital. So you could make the argument that hospitals may be more informed, number one, but also busier too, because many the doctors and patients out there, it's not always a synced up relation. So you also have fall detection and crash detection as well. Definitely aiming towards maybe that older crowd, and medications allowing that. So a lot of things are limited by sensors. So say for instance, it has an ECG, electrocardiograph for the heart, but it doesn't have an EEG or an MEG, for the brain quite yet. And there's parameters they have to look at. So here's some of the timeline. So 2015, first Apple Watch, and then 2017, the Stanford study. And a lot of these you're using more than one sensor at a time. So if you use heart, temperature and oxygen. And then 2018, here's the ECG. 2019, Apple Heart and Movement Study. And then, more advanced with cardio, basically. And then also with mobility, you have, basically you have the accelerometer and gyroscope, which are more common in today's phones. Fall detection, metrics, and walking steadiness as well. Now, the third-party applications is what kind of surprised me. So there's many things that they'll send the data, to the phone. You're talking blood pressure with cardio, weight with Withings Health Mate. And in town here, San Diego is Dexcom. So it's a patch that you put on your body, and then it monitors, for diabetes. And respiratory health as well, accessibility to ultrasounds, PTSD application. Surgical blood loss is actually done with the camera. This doesn't take another sensor, or it's actually done inside the phone. And then also Parkinson's disease. So, and that's kind of the tremors kind of movement that goes with it. And basically, as a startup, interested in a field that lacks good quality data, is the basically users, participants that want to, they can send their health data, and then it's for there may be different qualifications as far as sending it all versus one case, that kind of stuff. So Research Kit is kind of what I've been talking about. And then, so, the whole key with this is plugging in too with third party. So this is already a thing. I already said 90% of the top 20 hospitals, the nurses use these, iPhones exclusively. And basically, it seems like it's just good for everyone. Those that just want to monitor their healthcare data and don't want to send it to anybody until it's emergency, maybe, it just depends on what people want. So a couple of these quotes. The idea, just to kind of get this, if you're not familiar with healthcare AI, the idea really is, how do we provide a continuous style monitoring of patients in a relatively unobtrusive way that will allow us to detect a change in a patient status before they end up actually coming into the hospital. So this is where the opportunity with Apple is tremendous. Dr. Heather Ross, head of the Division of Cardiology at the Peter Monk Cardiac Center. We've gone as far as we can with traditional research. Now we have technology in our pockets that can let us go even further. So again, you would assume, if you have all these sensors monitoring individuals not at the hospital, that's not the case, is the data is being linked up. So NVIDIA is maybe more on the technical side of it all. So their platform is called Clara. So Clara is for imaging, genomics, patient monitoring, drug discovery, for users to build their own medical devices. So basically, a use case here: surgical environment with an accurate digital twin, a copy of the data, to improve surgical efficiency. And here's basically, for all of these different services, you're training AI models, building applications, verifying, and then deploying to commercial production eventually. Now, the one that kind of interests me, obviously, because it's, I do kind of neuroimaging, is the medical imaging. They say real-time AI processing of front-end sensors, graphics execution framework, some other support for kind of more legacy computing. And then Monai is, you'll hear about a lot. So Monai is this open source platform, 190 contributors, uniting doctors with data scientists. And then Guardian is for, you see where it says NVIDIA Clara Guardian, for smart hospitals. So multimodal AI, so this could be, you're combining different aspects of imaging, electronic health work, records, blood work, real-time response, with running this AI. And here's the stack here. So they do a lot with quantum. Quantum is not in the stack because it's not quite fully approved, but, figure for HoloScan, a lot of these things, and I'll show you some data, the GPU is making a significant difference. So NVIDIA Clara Parabricks is GPU accelerated. And this is for genomics, and they claim up to 80 times faster workflow. And then NVIDIA Clara Discovery is for drug discovery. And I'm going to be covering GPT 3 today. So, say if that one's 500 billion parameters, this is like 1.4 billion molecules, not apples to apples, but kind of give you a sense of where it is with the drug discovery. Now, here's what they say for Parabricks genomics, the potential X's, right? So genomics 30x, and then you see some of the other ones you see for imaging too, 30x as well. And then this next slide is basically saying if you use 8 of their, good GPUs, your performance could go 80x as compared to 96 CPUs. Now, this isn't quite apples to apples because, I think in other cases you would be using GPUs, but it kind of gives you a sense of like the power of, these, the potential of using GPUs for many applications and even using it to, these days for quantum. So this is an FDA de novo approval. So de novo means from scratch, or it's not a 510K. They're not nearly as common. And basically what happened here is it's Fuji Revio Diagnostics, and the specific test is cerebral spinal fluid. So inside our body, you can get the cerebral spinal fluid. It's not quite as accessible as blood. And it's for patients 55 years or older. So you'll hear a lot of comparisons to PET. So PET is very detailed, very precise, more expensive, less accessible. But with all these studies I'm going to show you, you can't form a diagnosis based on only CSF or blood, in the other case. So as you can see here, they call it a likely positive result is consistent with a positive amyloid PET. And that it does not establish a diagnosis of AD. So in some cases, if imaging is needed or not needed, this is being done to increase accessibility and to decrease cost. I've got some other kind of stats on another one of these slides too. So basically you see here, it must include the time from specimen collection for testing with the subject device to PET imaging acquisition, cognitive, neurological. So it's another screener. It's to get people in earlier for earlier, these earlier diagnostics kind of stuff. And it's very specific to what the function of the test is. So you'll see PET over and over again with this. This PET is standard. In some cases, if this is getting more people in that would not get tested for Alzheimer's, it may actually include tests or increase tests for neuroimaging as well too. And then another thing with these samples is that I worked in a biorepository before, and they can expire. The tubes are not perfect; they overflow, and so you're dealing with liquid nitrogen temperatures and a lot of these things. Basically, you have to take care of the samples, the cerebrospinal fluid sample right there. So in all these things, you have, again, it says it's not intended as a standalone test, and the test results, this is a breakthrough device, must be interpreted in conjunction with the other ones that I've been talking about. So it has to be, it's associated with amyloid beta plaques or tangles in the brain. But figure, this is one of the breakthrough devices last year. So in the blood side of it, this is Roche's Alexis amyloid plasma panel for Alzheimer's. And what they did is basically, it's the first in vitro diagnostics manufacturer to receive early AD detection. So the other one, the CSF, is not that, it's for diagnosis. This is for early AD detection. So it's important to read these FDA announcements because it can get mistranslated in, main news, headline news, these types of things. But basically, that's the thing: more timely, more accessible. And the mechanism behind it is it's this tau protein and ApoE4 protein, and that ApoE is a main genetic determinant if you're likely going to develop Alzheimer's. It's to get people in earlier in life. So up to 3 out of 4 people living with symptoms of Alzheimer's have not been diagnosed. These diagnosed waited 2.8 years on average. Like I said before, it has the potential to ensure better idea patients that require confirmatory testing with PET scan or CSF, right? So these are not standalones, but in this specific case with the Roche is try to get people in a little bit earlier with early identification of AD. They do a fair amount with the other Alzheimer's portfolio, with their portfolio, multiple treatments. This letter B is basically in November 2022, gantenerumab, their drug was less successful. So I don't know quite where they go from here, but it goes through all these stages and say, that didn't fare as well. But Roche is very synonymous with Alzheimer's research. Now, there's quantum potential for FDA breakthrough device as well. Now, most of the, the last year and a half in quantum machine learning, you have big articles from IBM and Roche. By the way, Roche is actually into quantum imaging as well. And, with a lot of these things is that the hardware or the quantum computer is not awesome. So the results are not yet awesome. And this is basically taking into account with this is that National Science Foundation says this year, 2023, we will get a practical quantum computer. Now, the whole key with this is I'll show you some kind of math a little bit later on, is basically the principles of superpositioning and especially entanglement offer an imaging quantum advantage potential for if you start getting into exponentially large dimensions and models. So that's the whole thing, is everybody in medical imaging, I mean, there's QCware, there's Rigetti, there's StrangeWorks in these, and basically over time, if you have a perfect system or something getting towards that direction, it's worth looking at on the data side for potential breakthrough device. So in summary, here's the 2 up top. These are the ones that have approval. These are FDA breakthrough. So the first one is the cerebrospinal fluid CSF, and with all of these, you'll see that you need to have other things confirming it. And it actually may kick up other industries as well to get even more tests, because now you have your initial test. It was confirmed that you should go on and get imaging, those types of things. So in the last one is basically, large dimensions, models, parameters. So a lot of you, I'll show you some GPT 3 stuff this session here, basically saying that their main search term is how does a quantum computer work? So it may allude to previous services, or services such like there's using quantum in some time in the future or even near future. Now, here's ChatGPT in a nutshell. So it's by OpenAI. And if you ever get on this, it's some people have issues. I had issues at first, consistently getting on, but now it's working fine. And it's a little slow, but it excels in constructing large paragraphs of whatever your question is. And you can ask it the pros and cons of things. It's a lot more, say, consistent than Google, because Google it might give you some ads, and it might give you like, the top links or whatever. But say, if you're doing certain types of things, it might make sense to do using it as a tool. So if you can ask it to please show me this. So say, for instance, like, please show me an example of a certain type of algorithm, it'll give you the code. And then it can actually fix some algorithms as well. So can you fix this? And yeah, it's not comprehensive, I would say, at this point, but I would say it kind of excels in certain key areas, as opposed to Google search being kind of faster and, maybe even more familiar. So they use this reinforcement learning from human feedback, training using supervised fine tuning, and sometimes it's just it's just spitting out an answer and it's just taking forever. But they say themselves, this current edition of GPT is excessively verbose. So they use Microsoft Azure for this. And the parameters have gone from 110 million to 1.7 billion to 175 billion. That's if you use their highest thing called DaVinci. And in the future, it sounds like 1.7 trillion parameters coming this summer. And that's where it's kind of like, alluding to the very first thing in the upper left-hand corner when you go to log on, explain quantum computing in simple terms. And that's what they say. So if we see quantum involvement with this year, we'll see. So basically, this is the whole summary of it. So I'm not going to go through it in detail, but it's just interesting because it's set up in a specific way. The gentleman that, is this, I believe he's the CEO of it. He's Y Combinator, which is up in San Francisco. And I've actually caught some of his other talks, and I didn't know he was the one kind of up to all this. So here's the paper. This is the ChatGPT-3 paper with dementia. And what it's doing here is you're taking the, say, for instance, it's Alzheimer's speech audio files. The traditional way of diagnosing those or taking a look at them is to look at the tones and the fluctuations of the audio. So it's interesting because their method doesn't do that. However, I don't think it does that completely, but it mostly focuses on taking just the words of the Alzheimer's patients talking and puts it into ChatGPT-3. I'll get into some of the nuts and bolts with this. So we're talking about, getting testing scores, these types of things, and for fine-tuned models. So this is kind of what I just explained. So A is the standard. So this is what exists right now. So, acoustic features. So it just has recordings, many recordings of Alzheimer's. It's not too much, maybe 200 or something like that. And then you would go through with your algorithm and then, pick up the tones and the fluctuations of somebody that might have dementia. Now, in the second one, it's speech to text. So it's actually taking that audio recording, generating it to text into GPT-3. And they're saying that using their approach, they got better accuracy. So I'll touch more on this, but basically the two preliminary models in GPT-3 that are the least expensive for researchers, what they're doing here, are called Babbage and Ada. So Babbage is the more expensive one. It has more parameters. And as you can see here, they put in the kind of like the bold, 10-fold CV. And then here, 0.8. So it's not always that it does better in everything, because something might be better. You see, say, for instance, 0.8 for accuracy, 0.843 for precision, and then in recall, ADA actually did better, right? So it's just kind of dependent on some parameters. Now, area under the curve, the more area, the better. So the orange one, ChatGPT-3, the Babbage, I performed better than Ada. And then as you can see here, as you go across, the say is GPT-3 compared to this, the BERT model. So same accuracy, less precision, but a lot better recall. right? So it's just very specific to what you're doing. And the algorithms that they use support vector regression, ridge regression, random forest regression, and basically first application of GPT-3 predicting dementia from speech. If you go to type in these types of things into ChatGPT-3, there are issues with medical and them giving certain information. So in this case, the ADA, is only 1,000 dimensions, 300 million parameters, and the Babbage, the one that did better, is 1.2 billion. The better ones, which they said they tried, but they had problems with overfitting, and they're also more expensive, 6 billion. And then here's the Da Vinci that gives you the full 175 billion parameters. So that's what they found. Is basically it's the fastest, most affordable for ADA. And then so a comparison between ADA, which is the cheapest, which is fractions of a penny, versus 20 cents per 1,000 tokens for Da Vinci. So what this means for medical is that, this is basically digging up some data. I didn't really know too much as far as audio recordings even existing. So you have to be aware of what's going on, because people say, oh, okay, you can type stuff in and it gives you really good results. So there's bias, privacy concerns, explainability, and here's the conventional acoustic. I thought that this might give you awesome results if it's looking at something when people talk, pause rate, phonation rate, periodicity of speech, and so forth, frequency analysis. That you would think that would give you good results, but they actually found with ChatGPT-3 that they just plugged it in. You're just taking the words that are coming off the audio recordings. So, in moving forward, so this is basically more of a review, ML and novel biomarkers. And what this basically says is there's all these cognitive tests, imaging techniques, cerebrospinal fluid levels. So, we're talking about, multimodal, all these different ways of addressing Alzheimer's and what's going to be the main one. So rapid and cost-effective HPLC for biomarkers. So in all these tests, HPLC is high-performance liquid chromatography. Is that, say in the Roche or the Roche blood work, or the other, company that had the CSF, is it an efficient way to get more people in for a lower expensive test? But those that test, that look like a probable, positive, may get referred to other, imaging tests as well. So they say up to $7.9 trillion in medical care expenses due to the accurate diagnosis of AD. And here's the data. Here's basically all the different machine learning approaches. You'll see a lot of these things. So KNNs, or K nearest neighbors, quite common. It just depends, because I'll start to see a lot of different things if it's something like an audio recording. But for imaging, you'll see a lot, random forest, SVMs, neural networks, and keep in mind a lot of these are heading towards quantum. And, as deep learning developed by machine learning, it's getting bigger. There's certain things MRI scans can't do, obviously molecular pathological hallmarks, and there's other things that, imaging is better at. Here's basically results of a bunch of the other studies, kind of in this. And, it's just interesting because some are cerebrospinal fluid, some are tau protein, it just depends on what was tested there. Now, in the neuroimaging side of it, this is exciting. So there's a device out there. I actually reviewed it several weeks ago. It's called a Hyperfine. It's a Swoop portable MRI. Now, this particular device moves around to the patient's bedside. It uses an Apple iPad. It has a relatively small magnet. It's over $1 million. And by the way, it weighs 1,400 pounds. So don't drop it down the stairs. And, it plugs into a regular outlet. So the key factor here, I think, is it's called standoff distance. So if you look at images of patients being analyzed by this, head scans for brain, is they're a lot closer to the instrument than you are in a, say, this is essentially, it's 0.064 Tesla. The standard out there is 1.5 or 3, but it can get decent images, right? But this is basically for patients that can't move, or it's cutting down on moving, instead of moving the patient, move the machine. So it's kind of like this big push for portability. Now, there's been developments over the years. So NIST says there's an MRI-like diamond tip proximity sensor that could be on the way, and they could function like an MRI, but you're just taking the probe in this. Now, you could say, how is that even possible? Well, we're talking about diamond quantum sensing. So it's biocompatible, and people have even talked about using this types of technology inside of cells, but figure that I'll get to a study where they placed it a lot closer to the subject as opposed to other devices that may be better but can't get as close. So that's a trend, is getting closer. So Microsoft has been working on this MRF. It's basically a quantum algorithm with it, and they can say that they can get a single scan. There's typical NMRs is the chemistry term of it, that's the instrument. For MRIs, I think for MRIs, you're talking about tens of thousands of molecules are needed for these. Now, Fermilab is actually number 3 here at the top. They're actually building their own quantum computer and quantum sensors to get better MRI analysis. And University of Chicago, this is a recent talk that's close to Fermilab. They were saying single molecule detection, which exists in other fields, but now we're saying, this is a potential for humans. And if you don't know, so a molecule is construction of atoms in a certain arrangement. So if you have the caffeine molecule, that's like 24 atoms that have certain hybridization, like that, some that are planar, some, certain arrangement. Now, the QSI, they're based in Japan, they do awesome stuff with MRI, like particle accelerators close to the hospital, and used in certain tests for cancer. Looking at it for increased sensitivity. And like I kind of alluded to, is there's more availability of quantum sensors these days. However, there's potential of using quantum sensing even more so to help quantum computers. Think of quantum sensing as, they say it's basically, everything but measuring, right? So it's able to do the quantum aspects of these, but you just don't measure it like you would with a computer. Now, the potential benefits for all these things, smaller magnets, even more portability than this instrument on the left, lower number of incomplete scans. So patients that have claustrophobia that have to sit there or lay there for 30, 45 minutes, this is a common thing, or they just can't handle it, right? And so it's wasting patient, instrument time, more of these kind of workers, technologists are needed to be around. So, beta, you get more patients in with lower scans, more sensitivity. And what you're going to find with all this, and by the way, reducing, if not eliminating, some of the cooling requirements, is a balance between performance and portability. So, say if you want to do, the quantum approach with quantum newer quantum sensors, quantum computer, all that kind of stuff, keep the same size, you're going to have an awesome one. Now, what's that balance of reducing the size, but keeping the results still pretty good? And this is basically, so I did some reports last year, and if there's only about 20 or 30, I think, of these squid MEGs. So squid MEG is essentially an EEG, but instead of measuring electrical, it measures magnetic. So they're superconducting. You have to put them, centimeters away from the patient, because you can't cool them down to negative 269 degrees Celsius. So the emerging one I saw was OPM Meg, which is millimeters away, but it can only do magnetic, and I don't think it's quite as biocompatible. But the thing that people are really talking about is diamond, right? So diamond quantum sensing. So you're taking a diamond, have impurities, and with fluorescence, right? So fluorescence, a lot of people like fluorescence. Biocompatible, room temp. So this could be the next medical probe of an indeterminate size. So, but yeah, that's basically, so MEG is magnetoencephalography. So every human right now, as we sit, emits both electric and magnetic information, and they actually, inside the brain, it's a electrical potential that fires, and at that same time, magnetic information. It's called the right-hand rule. at that same time comes out. So what it means is basically as things get closer to the head or any other part of the body, is that your magnet size and or radiation requirements to get that same level can be reduced quite significantly. So here's two of the examples. So they took a rat's heart, and basically they said using their diamond sensor, it got a lot closer than the OPM. However, the OPM has better signal to noise ratio. And on the right, it's an in vitro sample of a brain slice. And a lot of these things you're seeing zooms, right? Like, so figure like diamonds and nerves can be placed anywhere. You could use it for temperature. So temperature, magnetic, force, electric, and I think one other one, strain or shear, something like that. And in the upper right-hand corner, there's all these developments going on is to make it distortion-free. MIT had basically all RF frequencies are detected with Chinese researchers. There's machine learning for better accuracy in these things. So I'll show you a little bit later with Harvard that it's kind of synonymous with quantum computing. A lot of these to get, say, 2 seconds of memory. So quantum computing neural networks, or convolutional neural networks and quantum advantage, the big thing for imaging. So basically, if you have things, there's limits in the classical world. So if you have hard to learn, efficiency of dimensions too long, and there's mathematical advantages to quantum. So say if you're polynomial, like log base n, versus the classical approach, that I'll show you some data later that kind of supports that everything. So basically, quantum computers relies on quantum mechanics, complex numbers, linear algebra. Keep in mind, you can't do any of this without CPU, some type of classical component as well. Now, this is basically, so the difference here is these are lined up with qubits or quantum bits. So this is called staff notation. So you go through convolutional pooling to fully connected. So it offers benefits. And especially, as noise decreases and qubits increases for quantum hardware, is that it's going to offer, more and more, potential for better imaging. Now, this is basically, Jack Rapunski had this article a couple of years ago. And if it's ideal scenario with a perfect quantum computer, so in the math with this is basically 2 to the n to get the advantage. So if you have 2 qubits, 4x. 4 qubits, 16x, 8, and so forth. So you can see between 16 and 32, you go from tens of thousands to billions, right? So most of the stuff you see with quantum simulators, as far as it requires a certain amount of memory or RAM, you don't see too much for simulators beyond 30, 40. And this one kind of shows it. The next one shows a little bit. It's basically saying for a kilobyte of data, you only need 13 qubits, quantum bits, versus over 8,000. So that's just the main principle with this. And this one shows it more clearly. Now, the times with this, I believe, are what it would take to simulate on a classical computer using quantum mechanics. And the issue is the amount of RAM. So if we're at 400 something with IBM, and the one before was 127, that's where it's kind of like, you have to figure out what kind of tricks are happening in order to get away from the 1 exabyte of memory. And this might actually spark some conversation a little bit later. So here's the Harvard impact in quantum, and especially quantum sensing and computing, is they're using these diamonds. So in diamonds, they're supposed to be 100% carbon. They're, the diamond scale, they're hard. And what most of them are nitrogen vacancies, because nitrogen, I think it accounts for at least 1% of impurities in diamonds anyway. And I think it gives it a certain type of color. Now with silicon, that's what Harvard's focusing on, is you can engineer these so that your effect, instead of nitrogen vacancy, has had silicon vacancy. So they say that you could have a quantum computer platform based on that. And then also for quantum sensing for memory, this big paper, they mentioned the word diamond. And then lastly, the November 2022, this huge announcement, 2 seconds of quantum memory. It's for networking applications. But when I look at all this, I'm thinking like, yeah, maybe silicon vacancy could have a big impact on quantum computers. That's kind of what I see right there. And NVIDIA, likewise, is doing all this stuff, not only in medical, how I covered before with healthcare AI, but in quantum. So Q quantum, they have CODA, QODA. So you see these X's. So these are potential, to get better. So the data on the left is what some researchers did, that it took 10 hours, and it's basically trying to keep everything the same. How long would it take using these quantum approaches as they kind of get better or emerge? And this is basically ChemicalQDevice stage 1 and 2. So stage 1 is focusing on prediction. Stage 2 is more imaging. And in specific, here's stage 1. So this is a timeline, and this basically for all the different quarters in 2023, which is where we're at right now, with the assumption of having partnerships, funding hires, and other related mechanisms to satisfy. Now, I did a lot of this research because I wasn't quite sure what was going on in the blood and CSV. And I just found more and more supporting evidence that it seems like, imaging is going to be around kind of for a long time. And the first one is they pulled together all of these CDER, CDRH, SNMMI, MITA. These are medical imaging related organizations. There was a workshop last November. I didn't go. But it's kind of like, I think, like huddling a little bit. And the ADNI 4 is basically, they have 3 other ADNIs. It's been going on for quite some time. So, 1,500 participates in this one. And then here on the bottom is all the quantum involvement of what's going on. Now, keep in mind, the results are not awesome because the computers are not awesome, but the framework has been laid in healthcare QML, or quantum machine learning. And, a lot of these, you really should know all of their methods and analyses, I would say, as we see more news. Now, stage 2 is accelerated reconstruction, and it's based off of, so medical imaging processing, you need to detect or stent, say, with a new quantum sensor. Now, the next step takes that data, turns it into imaging, and that's called reconstruction. So there's a number of things that can be done in this step as well, as far as motion correction, denoising, and or undersampling. But basically, ChemicalQDevice looking at getting into this, say, later this year, 2023, quarter 4. And then the stage 3 is incorporating these stage 1, stage 2, for not only are you getting better, prediction, but then on the fundamental level of getting better images as well. And this is kind of like, working a lot off of some of the other, Fermilab and QSI and those that are getting better hardware with quantum techniques as well. So as you can see here, so these are some of the details to it. So FDA approvals that there's been in reconstruction imaging. So these are conventional approaches, GE Healthcare, Hyperfine, which is that portable MRI. A lot of these are 510K submission approvals, which means that they're based on their own predicate device, I think in both these cases, or it can be based on other companies as well. So there's Seth Lloyd, so this is MIT, did this big paper with reconstruction algorithms. And a lot of these researchers he started doing these, I think, medical imaging focused algorithms many years ago. I want to say like 2014. And he's just been waiting like everybody else for the awesome quantum computer. And then, so you have the precedents in this, there's systems. So basically in stage 3 is you can have, so the GE, this ultrasound is a collection of algorithms and collection of, different medical components. And similar to the swoop, this Hyperfine is, you're talking like 15 or somewhere like that approvals, that these instruments have to meet continuously. And this is the paper that kind of got closest. So this is basically on a penny lane quantum simulator. It's using a QVC, with 4 qubits here. And it's the quantum insertion of a layer here to get better results over an existing, classical approach. So here they said they got 92% for classical on their own, using their methods, and then 97% for the quantum hybrid right there. So this shows that Penny Lane is typically outperforming KISS-kits on quantum machine learning tasks. So that's based off Xanadu, which is the hardware component of it in Toronto. And this just shows the level of involvement here, between hospitals, and the data goes in a circle, achieving things as you go along. So in explainable AI, this and multimodal are kind of like the hot topics. Everybody wants something where the doctor, your end user, can understand something that's constructed by programmers. However, programmers don't know medical don't know programmers that well, and that in lies the issue. But figure in a lot of these things, going more towards, can you really make sense of the results that you're just handed? So I mentioned some of these. So IBM Cleveland Clinic already is working on installing on a quantum computer at Cleveland Clinic. NYU Langone Fermilab is the one to get better MRI analysis with quantum. This National Institute for Science, Quantum Science Tech, better sensitivity. Mount Sinai for patient data security. NSF is the one that is saying they began funding quantum technologies early 1980s. So they're saying they're pinpointing this year to be a practical quantum computer. So you have, the impact. So these are QML papers from Amgen, IEEE, Roche QCware, and then NIH, Springer Nature as well. So this is basically, if you want to do the hardest way to get the best results, it's called technology readiness levels. So I'm, forecasting a QML TRL, because they already have ML TRLs for machine learning, or QML. But it's all these cards that you follow to get to make sense of what you're doing and to get the best results. Now, here's a big pitch deck I did. So it follows everything from quantum, medical, and business. And that was, I think, later last year. Here's the business model: licensing, subscriptions, and partnerships, and specific to find partners that do good and well. Basically, what that means is financially and for the sake of the patient too. So here's the proposed technology. So this was based on Subaya et al. And it's basically inserting the admin databases and the patient MRI. Now, with most of this stuff is with hyperparameters, fine tuning is quantum being used. So over here. And then there's opportunities as well in the drug. Clinical drug trials require a fair number of MRIs and or PET scans. So having this stage 2 of ChemicalQDevice with accelerated reconstruction, may be a good area to go into, to focus into. Here's all of the stuff basically for stage 2 that would help potentially make better neural images. So a lot of the foundational stuff with quantum sensing is being worked on. I shared at least 5 or 6 of these links. And, focusing more on reconstruction, this algorithm that takes the raw data and turns it into images. So, these are availabilities for stage 2. And then competition. So Generative is the biggest. Rigetti Strangeworks, they're the most recent quantum, basically saying they're using quantum machine learning for medical image now. They did some preliminary tests, I think with pneumonia and like a retinal test, so that's where that is going in quantum. But I figure a lot of these, and based on not just me, but what other people are doing as well, is they'll start to go towards quantum, or at least hybrid quantum approaches as well. The biggest thing right now, I would say, is drug discovery. I mean, besides Roche QCware, Strangeworks, Rigetti, myself, doing more imaging. The kind of like the more common thing is drug discovery, but with heavy approximations. And then for ISO, IEC, NEMA, ASTM, ANSI, they'll likely have to get more in tune with quantum and the difference between, say, probabilistic versus deterministic. And then, so here's 10 recent FDA approvals here. So some of these have been going over recently. GE Healthcare, the Swoop, that portable MRI I'll show you is number 4, and it has, I think, closer to like between ISO, IEC, NEMA, all of these regulatory things that you need. So that's just how that works. And then in specific, here's these are clinical drug trials. And then I kind of put through like every time there's MRI or PET scan, those types of things between Asahi, Roche, Eli Lilly, and so forth. So in specific, the medical imaging late last year, November, December, there's a lot of news. So Google Cloud, Health Lake by Amazon, Nuance, and NVIDIA, they all announced, the latest and greatest in medical imaging. Now the trend is less radiologists and then, more AI. So I think it was Amazon that kind of pointed that out. But figure, to interpret images at its peak, I think, there was maybe dozens of radiologists in one room looking at the same image, and that's so many more man hours. So you're going to see all these roles kind of shift in healthcare, as opposed to, neuroimaging is basically to get better neuroimages. Neuroradiology is basically the diagnosis, and this is or prediction, and this is kind of where this is at. So keep in mind, no mention of quantum, but a lot of these basically all of these companies are involved with quantum, all 4 of them. So, later announcements. So here's prospective hardware vendors, the main differentiator: ion trap, superconducting qubit. There's also photonics and neutral atom include there too, spin qubits, but they all have like specific things that they're better at. Here's the preliminary 6-factor analysis. This is a Harvard course I took, and breaking it apart as far as like the structures, identifying competition, which I've done. Who's a potential partner in all of this, and even some of the companies that I featured today. And this is basically as things revolve or evolve, there's cause and effects to issues, and it's kind of pinpointing this on the quantum side. Materials, pre-existing neuroimages, these types of things, but the process, quantum data, and medical data dynamics as well. So stage 1, 2, and 3 and 4 are laid out here. So the first one's prediction. The second one is just to get better images. The third one is combinatory, and then the fourth one is potential FDA submission. After IEC, NEMA, they get they approve. And the ChemicalQDevice mission statement is this: to improve neuroimaging techniques utilizing quantum technologies for better sensitivity, signal strength, and/or resolution, combined with advanced prediction and neuroradiology for Alzheimer's disease. I went through, so this is something that, other people that are very familiar with corporate strategy. So are working quantum computers available that can run QML for neuroimaging? Check. Does ChemicalQDevice have capabilities to program QML neuroimaging on quantum computers? Not currently. Solution is, partnerships, medical and/or QML healthcare. Is action available to create products? Not currently. Does the product satisfy the following requirements? Is it valuable? Check. Is it rare? Yes. Is it not imitatable? I still have to do more research on that and kind of like define things. And is ChemicalQDevice organized for success? I wouldn't say currently, based on kind of these other mechanisms, with medical experts and quantum experts coming together. I know a fair amount of these QML programmers, and I would say is getting together closely, with partnering with these organizations that do good and well on the medical side. So neuroimaging, prediction, database, although I've done a fair amount of research and I can kind of work my way around there, and with regulations as well.